New Year's Eve in Boston is unforgiving. My father, Robert, stood in the open doorway of our brownstone, holding my cashmere coat. He didn't hand it to me. He tossed it into the snowbank. $50,000. He spat. That is the buy-in for Ashley's party. If you can't contribute to this dynasty, go find a shelter that takes parasites. He slammed the heavy oak door in my face. I stood in the blizzard in just a silk blouse, shivering. I checked my watch. My time was currently billing at $6,000 an hour. I didn't knock. I smiled. And I walked away. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. 3 weeks later, the silence in my penthouse wasn't lonely. It was expensive. From the 45th floor of the Seaport Tower, Boston looked like a circuit board of gold and steel pulsing against the freezing darkness of the harbor. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass, sipping tea that cost more per ounce than the champagne my sister Ashley had been drinking while she laughed at my expense. The heated floors radiated warmth through my socks, a stark contrast to the numbness I'd felt walking away from that brownstone. I walked to my desk, a slab of imported black marble that floated in the center of the room, and woke up my monitors. The screens flooded the room with blue light, displaying the dashboard of my patent portfolio. While my father was busy telling the extended family I was a drug addict sleeping on friends' couches, my synthetic blood compound was currently being stocked in emergency rooms across 40 states. I logged into my personal banking portal. The numbers refreshed instantly. Last year, my royalties weren't just a salary. They were an empire. $52 million. It wasn't just money. It was a wall of no that I could put between myself and anyone who tried to control me. I clicked open a separate tab, monitoring my family's social media. Ashley was posting photos of her luxury life, tagging designers she couldn't afford and venues she hadn't paid for. Her boutique, the Gilded Thread, was hemorrhaging money. I knew because I'd pulled the public records. Foot traffic was down 60%. The building needed structural repairs. The illusion of success they projected was operating on a deficit so deep it was practically a sinkhole. My phone buzzed on the marble surface. It was a notification from Facebook. My mother, Susan. She'd posted in her church group again. Please keep our family in your prayers during this difficult season. Our eldest daughter, Megan, is battling severe addiction and refuses to come home. We are doing everything we can to support her from a distance. But sometimes tough love is the only way to help a lost soul find their footing. Attached was a photo of me from college, looking exhausted during finals week, weaponized to look like a withdrawal symptom. I didn't feel angry. Anger implies surprise. And I wasn't surprised. This was the ledger finally balancing out. For years, I had kept a subconscious mental book. Every time I paid off one of Ashley's credit cards, I marked it as an investment in love. Every time I stayed silent while my father belittled my science projects, I marked it as a down payment on acceptance. I thought if I just paid enough into the account of being a good daughter, eventually, I would get a withdrawal of kindness. But the coat in the snow was the audit. It proved the account was fraudulent. There was no love to withdraw. They had been embezzling my affection for decades. I closed the Facebook tab. I didn't comment. I didn't defend myself. I opened my email to find a message from Vance, the forensic lawyer I'd hired the morning after New Year's. The subject line was simple: discrepancy found. I clicked it open. Attached was a loan document from a commercial lender. A commercial line of credit for $1.4 million. Taken out 3 weeks ago. The collateral wasn't just the boutique building. It was my name. My patent portfolio listed as a guarantor. And at the bottom, a signature in blue ink. Megan Sterling. It looked like my signature. The loop of the M. The sharp cross of the T. But I hadn't signed it. My father had. They hadn't just kicked me out. They had stolen my identity to fund the party, celebrating my absence. I picked up the phone and dialed Vance. "Don't sue them yet," I said. "Find out who holds the note. I want to buy it." The office of Vance and Associates was 60 floors up, smelling of leather and intimidation. Vance didn't look like a lawyer who handled family disputes. He looked like a shark in a tailored suit who ate other sharks for breakfast. He slid a thick file across the mahogany table toward me. "It is worse than we thought," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Your father didn't just forge your signature on the loan. He leveraged the entire equity of the brownstone to secure the down payment for the gala venue. They are all in. If this party fails, they don't just lose the boutique. They lose everything." I opened the file. It was a forensic autopsy of my family's financial corpse. Credit card statements showing Ashley spending $10,000 a month on clothes she never sold. Mortgage late notices hidden in a drawer. And the masterpiece? The loan application. My father had listed me as a silent partner, claiming I had committed my future royalties to cover their overhead. He had gambled my life's work on a party meant to rebrand a failing clothing store. The bank was hesitant. Vance continued, tapping a specific email printout. "But your father showed them the press release about your synthetic blood FDA approval. That sealed it. They lent him $1.4 million based on your brain." Megan. Not his business plan. I stared at the signature again. It was a good forgery. He must have practiced. The lender is a private equity group in New York. Vance said, "They specialize in high-risk commercial debt. They don't care about family drama. They care about yield. If I call them and offer to buy the note at full face value plus a premium for the immediate liquidity, they will sell. They would rather have cash today than chase a failing boutique for 10 years. Do it," I said. "Offer them 5% above the principal. Wire the funds from my holding company. I want the transfer executed by close of business today." Vance nodded, typing a note on his tablet. "Once you hold the note, you are the creditor. You have the right to call the loan if there is a material breach of contract. And forgery is definitely a material breach. But Megan, are you sure? Once we do this, there is no going back. You are declaring war. I am not declaring war." "Vance," I said, closing the file. "I am executing a hostile takeover. They wanted a partner? They got one. They just forgot to read the fine print." I stood up and walked to the window. Looking out over the city, my family was probably running around right now, finalizing the floral arrangements, yelling at caterers, feeling like masters of the universe because they had secured the loan. They thought they had tricked the system. They thought they had used my name to save themselves without me ever knowing. They didn't realize that by using my name, they had invited me into the one place they couldn't control. The contract. "Get the paperwork ready," I said, turning back to Vance. "And draft a notice of default. But don't send it. Bring it with you tomorrow night." "Tomorrow night?" Vance asked, raising an eyebrow. "The gala," I said. "If I am paying for the party, I think I should make an appearance. The night of the new year." New Era Gala arrived with a bitter wind that rattled the windows of the boutique. But inside, the air was thick with expensive perfume and unearned confidence. I watched from the live stream on my phone. Sitting in the back of a town car parked a block away, Ashley had spared no expense. The boutique had been transformed. Ice sculptures dripped onto white tablecloths. A jazz band played in the corner. Champagne towers defied gravity. It was a shrine to vanity, built on stolen credit. Robert and Susan were holding court near the entrance, clinking crystal flutes with the city's B-list elite. I watched my father laugh, his chest puffed out, looking every inch the patriarch he pretended to be. He was bragging to a local developer. I could practically hear the lies through the screen talk of strategic expansion, of legacy, of silent partners who trust my vision. He didn't look like a man who had forged his daughter's signature. He looked like a man who believed he had done her a favor. This is the nature of the narcissistic injury. I had read about it extensively after the eviction. When a narcissist is confronted with shame, like a daughter who is more successful than him, or a business that is failing, his mind rewrites reality to protect his ego. He truly believed he deserved my money. In his mind, my patent wasn't my achievement, it was an asset of the family he headed. Therefore, forging my name wasn't a crime. It was a correction. He was simply moving assets around within the kingdom he delusionally thought he ruled. He wasn't afraid of getting caught, because kings don't get caught. They get obeyed. We're ready. Ms. Annie Sterling, Vance said from the seat beside me. He had a briefcase on his lap, his expression grim. Let's go, I said. I stepped out of the car. The cold air hit me, reminding me of that night on the porch 3 weeks ago. But this time, I wasn't wearing a coat. I was wearing a tailored suit that cost more than my sister's entire inventory. I wasn't shivering. I was burning with a cold. A clear purpose. We walked toward the boutique. The security guard at the door glanced at his clipboard, frowned, and then looked at Vance. Vance flashed a card, said something low and legal, and the guard stepped aside, looking confused but intimidated. We pushed through the glass doors. The noise of the party washed over me: laughter, clinking glass, the murmur of self-congratulation. I stood in the entryway for a moment, just watching them. Ashley was in the center of the room, holding a microphone, beaming at her phone, which was mounted on a ring light, broadcasting to her 500,000 followers. And tonight, Ashley chirped, her voice amplified by the speakers. We have a huge announcement. A mystery partner who believes in the vision of the Gilded Thread so much. They invested millions to take us global. We're just waiting for the final signatures. Susan clapped enthusiastically. Robert beamed. They were so high on their own supply they didn't even notice the temperature in the room dropping. They didn't see the wolf walking through the door. They saw only the sheep they thought they had sheared. I stepped into the light. The silence didn't happen all at once. It rippled outward from the door. A wave of hush that traveled as people nudged each other and turned to look. I walked through the crowd, Vance a step behind me like a shadow. I saw the recognition hit my mother's face first. Susan dropped her champagne flute. It shattered on the hardwood floor, the sound sharp and violent in the sudden quiet. "Megan," she hissed, rushing toward me, her heels clicking frantically against the wood. She intercepted me 10 feet from the stage, blocking my path with her body. Up close, I could see the panic fracturing her foundation. She looked at my suit, Italian wool, perfectly tailored. She looked at my skin, clear, sharp, sober. It didn't match the script she had written for her friends. It didn't match the tragedy she was selling. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into the fabric. You look manic. Are you high? Did you come here to beg for money in front of everyone? Get out. Get out before you embarrass your sister." I looked at her hand on my arm. I didn't pull away. I just stared at it until she let go, unnerved by the lack of reaction. "I'm not high, Suzanne," I said, my voice level enough to carry to the nearby tables. "And I certainly didn't come to beg. I came to check on my investment." "Your investment?" she laughed. A brittle, nervous sound. "You don't have a dime to your name. You're delusional. Go back to whatever halfway house you crawled out of." Before I could answer, a blinding white light swung toward us. Ashley. She had seen the commotion. She had seen the crowd watching. And like any good influencer, she decided to monetize the drama. She pivoted the ring light and the phone. aiming the camera directly at my face. "Guys," Ashley said, her voice dropping into a practiced, somber register for her 500,000 live viewers. I didn't want you to see this part of my life. But this is the reality of addiction." She walked toward me, the camera steady in her hand. She was framing the shot. Me, the villain. In there, the saint. "This is my sister, Megan. We've been praying for her. It looks like she escaped rehab to crash my big night." She turned the camera to selfie mode, capturing a tear glistening perfectly in her eye. "It breaks my heart that she can't be happy for me. But we're going to show her love anyway. Right, guys? Drop a heart in the chat for Megan." The room was dead silent. The guests were watching a car crash in real time, unsure if they should look away or applaud. Ashley looked at me, a smug triumph in her eyes. She thought she had trapped me. She thought that by broadcasting my shame, she had neutralized me. She was betting everything on the lie. "We love you, Megan," Ashley said, stepping closer, extending a hand as if to comfort a wounded animal. "But you need to leave. We have serious business to conduct. The owner of the building is here to sign the papers." I looked at the camera lens. I saw the comments scrolling by on the screen: prayers, hearts, judgments. I looked at Vance. He nodded once. "You're right, Ashley," I said, stepping past her outstretched hand and walking toward the microphone stand in the center of the room. "The owner is here. My father." Robert stepped forward, his eyes darting between me and the well-dressed man at my side. He decided to ignore me. In his world, I was still the variable that didn't fit the equation. So he solved for Vance instead. He extended a hand, putting on his best country club smile, the one he reserved for people he needed money from. "You must be the representative for the silent partner," Robert boomed, his voice echoing slightly in the sudden quiet. "I'm Robert Sterling. We spoke on the phone. Thank you for believing in our vision." Vance didn't take the hand. He didn't even blink. He looked at Robert's outstretched palm like it was a subpoena he refused to serve. The silence in the room stretched thin, tight as a violin string about to snap. "I am not the partner, Mr. Sterling," Vance said. His voice was calm, projecting easily to the back of the room without a microphone. "I am legal counsel. I represent the entity that purchased your distressed debt from the bank this afternoon. I am here to introduce you to your creditor." Robert laughed nervously. I don't understand." The investor is the creditor," Vance clarified. He took a half step back and gestured to me. "May I introduce the sole proprietor of Sterling Holdings and the holder of the note, Megan Sterling." The room didn't gasp. It stopped breathing entirely. I watched the comprehension land on Robert's face. It wasn't instant. It had to fight through layers of narcissism and delusion. But then his eyes flicked to my suit, to the diamonds in my ears, to the way I stood, not like a daughter, but like a boardroom executive. I stepped up to the microphone. Ashley was frozen, her phone still raised, the ring light reflecting in her wide, terrified eyes. I looked directly into the lens. "Hello, everyone," I said. My voice was steady, magnified by the speakers. "There are 500,000 of you watching right now. You tuned in for a success story. You tuned in to support a family in crisis. But you were lied to." "Megan." "Stop," Susan whispered, lunging forward. Vance stepped in her path. A solid wall of wool and litigation. "I am not in rehab," I continued, speaking to the live stream. "I am not an addict. I am a biochemist. I hold the patent for the synthetic hemoglobin currently used in the ambulance parked down the street. And 3 weeks ago, I was evicted from my family home because I refused to fund this party. I nodded to Vance. He tapped his tablet. A projector, which Ashley had set up to display her logo, flickered. The image changed. It wasn't a logo anymore. It was a PDF. This, I said, pointing to the wall behind me, is a commercial loan agreement dated January 4th. The principal amount is $1.4 million. The document was 10 feet tall. Everyone could see it. And this, I said, Vance swiping to the signature page, is the personal guarantee. A collective murmur rippled through the crowd. That says Megan Sterling, I said. But look at the pressure on the pen. Look at the slant of the cess. I didn't sign that. My father did. Robert turned a shade of gray, usually reserved for corpses. That is felony fraud, I said. Securities fraud, identity theft, and bank fraud. My lawyer, Mr. Vance, acquired this debt today, which means I am no longer your daughter in this room. Robert, I am the bank. Ashley finally lowered the phone. But she didn't cut the stream. She was paralyzed. The comments were flying by so fast they were a blur of color anger. Shock. Betrayal. Because the lease for this building was secured by a fraudulent guarantee. I said, my voice dropping an octave. Becoming pure business. The lease is void. However, I am a reasonable landlord. I am willing to offer a month-to-month arrangement. Vance pulled a document from his briefcase and handed it to Robert. Robert's hands shook so badly he nearly dropped it. This is a notice of rent adjustment, I announced. Effective immediately. And retroactive to the date of the lease due to the fraud clause. The rent for a commercial space of this square footage in the historic district is not $6,000. It is $42,000 a month. $42,000? Susan screeched. You can't do that. I can, I replied. I own the debt. I own the building. And I own the contract you breached. You currently owe arrears of $48,000 in unpaid rent, plus the $1.4 million principal of the loan, which I am calling due. Immediately, I looked at my family. They were stripped of their pretenses. They weren't the royalty of Boston. They were tenants in default. You have 24 hours to wire the full amount, I said, or vacate the premises. Susan opened her mouth to scream. To beg. To invoke the sacred bond of motherhood she had pawned years ago for social status. But I didn't let her speak. I didn't give them the dignity of a closing argument. I raised my hand. A simple, sharp gesture to the back of the room. The security team. I had hired 4 men in dark suits who made the boutique's rental guard look like a mall cop stepped out of the shadows. They didn't ask nicely. They moved with the efficiency of a foreclosure crew. One stepped between me and Robert. Another took Ashley by the elbow as she tried to tilt the camera back toward me. This event is over, the lead guard said. The owner has closed the premises. You need to vacate immediately. You can't do this, Ashley shrieked. The veneer of the influencer cracking to reveal the terrified child beneath. My followers are watching. Good, I said. Let them see you leave. Robert tried to bluster. His face, a map of purple rage. Megan. This is your family. You are destroying us over money? Over a coat? I'm not destroying you. Robert, I said, turning my back to him to face the empty champagne tower. I'm just auditing the books. And you came up short. They were escorted out the front door. Pushed into the cold wind they had condemned me to 3 weeks earlier. I didn't watch them go. I didn't stand at the window and gloat. I simply signaled to Vance. He locked the doors. The silence that filled the room wasn't heavy. It was clean. It smelled like bleach and fresh starts. The next morning, I didn't wait for the 24-hour deadline. I knew they didn't have the money. I had a crew there by 8 in the morning. We gutted the place. The velvet ropes, the ice sculptures, the racks of overpriced clothes, it all went into a dumpster. I didn't keep a souvenir. I didn't want a trophy. 2 days later, I sold the building. I didn't put it on the market. I called Ashley's biggest rival, a woman she had spent years mocking on Instagram, and offered it to her at a discount for a quick close. The only condition was that she had to keep the under new management sign up for a month. It was the final depreciation of the asset. I erased their legacy by handing it to their enemy. I sat in the first-class lounge at Logan Airport, watching the snow fall on the tarmac. My phone buzzed. It was a text from a new number. Probably Robert. Begging or threatening. I didn't read it. I blocked it. Then I went into my settings and changed my number entirely. I looked at my boarding pass. Geneva. The Alps. I was going to spend a month skiing, surrounded by snow. But this time, the cold wouldn't be a punishment. It would be a choice. I had spent my life trying to buy a seat at their table, paying in silence, in obedience, in money. I thought that if I just gave enough, they would finally let me sit down. But I realize now that the table was rotten. The house was condemned, and I didn't need a seat. I owned the bank. I took a sip of sparkling water and closed my eyes. I didn't feel happy. Exactly. Happiness is fleeting. I felt something heavier. More permanent. I felt solvent. If you've ever had to evict toxic family from your life to save your sanity, share your story in the comments. And don't forget to follow for more stories of justice served cold.